Alright, my name is Sean Fallon, and you're listening to episode 16, Mad Men. Welcome to From First to Last. Where everybody knows. Hello again, and welcome again. My name is Sean Fallon. This is From First to Last. Today we've got the whiskey in glasses. We've got a couple of cartons of Lucky Strikes, and my guest today is Ethan Williams. How are you today, Ethan?
I'm doing well.
What TV show did you choose for us today?
I chose Mad Men, which is probably my favorite show ever.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, let's get straight into it then. What is your experience with Mad Men?
Well, I started watching Mad Men probably my sophomore year of high school, and I really got into it. Especially, I think it was around the time the fourth season was about to premiere, and before the days of Netflix Instant. So I actually had to rent the copies of the DVDs from my local library. Wow. And I just sat there on my little portable DVD player in my room because I didn't have a laptop, so I would just binge. It was literally binge watching before that was like the in vogue way to describe it. But yeah, that was my experience with it. So I caught up really quickly, and then so for the last I guess 4 seasons, because they split it up. The last season they split it up into 2 parts, but
okay. So
probably. Oh yeah, for a few years, I was probably one of the few kids in my high school who just totally was absorbed in this show and the characters, and had very few people to talk about it with. But it was like my first prestige drama. Like, I was really getting into movies at the time,
yeah.
But I hadn't had like that TV show kind of phase, I guess. But yeah, it was like the first prestige drama that's really got its hooks in me. So
that's fascinating. That
yeah,
like I can't imagine anyone in high school watching this show, like, because
right.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Right, and it was weird. Like, if I could point it to you why, like, exactly this show got to me, I couldn't exactly pin it down, especially back then, because I know I was like, it wasn't my normal, diet of media. I was like more action cinema, or like I used to like a lot of war movies and stuff, but it was very kind of outside of that perimeter. So
yeah, that's fine. Well, it's actually, I guess, a similar thing to that is I got into The Sopranos at high school.
Yeah.
But that was more of a thing of like, I could sell that to my friends, because I'd be like,
exactly,
it's
right,
like
Goodfellas
or Godfather,
exactly.
And
yeah, they literally reference Godfather every single episode. So I mean, yeah, it's hard to escape that mythology. And of course, Matthew Weiner famously worked on The Sopranos before.
Of course,
Mad Men. Yeah.
I imagine that would be a hard sell in high school, being like, hey guys, let's watch this show. You like Sweet Smell of Success in the apartment, right? That's references that kids get.
See, I didn't even see those movies until years later, so it's kind of bizarre that I got so attracted to the show in the first place.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, my sort of thing with Mad Men, now this will be sacrilege to you, because I never finished Mad Men. I got
oh my goodness
4 and a bit seasons in.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of... Because I think... this probably speaks to my sort of... maybe my unsophisticated tastes in like film and TV, but sometimes like a long-form character study loses me. Like Sopranos was the same thing. I just got to a point where I was like, I don't feel like this is going anywhere.
Yeah,
I know that's the point.
I quit Sopranos probably... I tried to binge watch it last year, and I think I quit around season 4. I know that was like there was some sort of like I know that's like a common thing that a lot of people did, because it got really boring in that season, but like, oh, just keep going, and I was like, okay, I will, and then I never did.
yeah, that's it. Same. I think I watched it when I was in high school, and I watched like the first 3 years, and then but I do find like there's a lot of those old shows that I watched in like real time, and it's sort of like it would be like the last couple of years of high school, and then there'd be the summer, and then I started university, or I started something else, and TV just fell by the wayside. I'd be like, oh, no, I'm busy doing other things, and so on.
Yeah, see, my whole first year of college was Doctor Who. Like, that was the thing I got it really into when I finally got to college. Was like, I didn't put a lot of time in my studies. I put most of my time making sure I caught up with Doctor Who, all like 7 seasons at that point.
See, that's interesting again. So, sorry, Ethan, how old are you?
I am 23.
Oh, okay, cool. So I'm 32, so that makes sense, because my last year of college, of university, was when Doctor Who, the new Doctor Who premiered.
Oh, I see.
So
Eccleston, yeah.
Yeah, so I was sort of, and I lived with like 4 other dudes who were 1 year younger than me, so they were still like big heavy drinkers, heavy partiers, and I was in my last year, and I was like, sorry guys, I can't come out clubbing tonight, gotta watch Doctor Who.
Yeah, when the show has been off the air for 16 years, and you know, you have no idea what it's going to be like, but you're just going to give it a shot because, you know, it's a classic. Well,
and Christopher Eccleston, always been a fan from way back. He was the reason I got into it.
Yeah, he's fabulous. I think he's definitely underrated. I wish he had stayed more, but then again, that season is so perfect. I understand why he didn't want to come back.
That's it. Well, my Mad Men thing, I started watching it when I ended up trying to watch it 3 times. So the 3rd time, me and my wife sat down and tried to watch it, and we just sort of got to a point where we were like, oh, should we watch another one? You know, a week would pass between episodes.
Right.
And say, oh, should we watch another one? Let's watch something else. And then we just never got back into it.
Yeah.
The 2nd time, I was just sort of trying to get into it and just was very bitty. Like, I started it and I did something else, and then But the first time I started watching it, and this first episode, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes.
Yeah.
The first time I tried to watch it was the day I quit smoking.
Oh my goodness.
Just by accident. I lived in Korea. I decided I was going to quit. I redid all the furniture in my apartment. I binned all my lighters, ashtrays, cigarettes, and everything. I was like, right, I'm going to start a new TV show. It's a brand new day. And I got about 15 minutes into this. And I was like, no, oh God, no, it's too much.
Yeah, at least you didn't try to go sober that first episode either. You know, that would have just been too much.
Yeah, it's full on. So, let me just do my numbers first.
Sure.
So, Mad Men ran for 92 episodes from 2007 to 2015. First episode was a Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Now, rewatching this, what did you think of this first episode?
I'd say it's pretty strong. But I watched it twice in preparation for this episode. But I think it was better the second time because I actually wanted to take more detailed notes about it. But I want to say it paints in very broad strokes compared to a lot of the more like what came to follow. It tries to put you in the time period almost a little too heavily or like a little too quickly, where they're trying to paint in very broad strokes where like this was a totally different time. Like people were more sexist, people were more racist.
Yeah.
And you know, it just kind of it's full on in that respect where you just kind of it hits you over the head a little bit. In a way, it was like a lot of the show Mad Men. What's great about it, a lot of it is how subtle it is and how dramatically subtle it is. But so that can be a detriment to some people because sometimes they get really bored. But I think this episode kind of really is a little broad as far as that goes. But I found a lot more to enjoy in it. I think the second time around because you just start when I had watched the finale at that point and I was trying to go back and see where it started. So I'd say it's good, but it's kind of setting the scene. It's not anything groundbreaking as far as characters go, but that's the way Mad Men is. It's very the characters change bit by bit, not in these dramatic moments like a Breaking Bad explosion kind of thing.
I had that. I remember the first time trying to watch the show, or the second time, or one of the times. Like the first couple of episodes, they are very much like, this is the setting, these are the issues, this is how people were treated. And that first episode, like watching it, it's just like, you can see what they're trying to do and what they're trying to say, but there's no nuance to it. They haven't got to that point. There's lines of dialogue where Don's like, oh, if there was a magical machine for making copies, like,
that was funny.
Heavy, that is clunky. I get it, and really I like it, but at the same time, like, ooh, if they'd kept that level through the whole show, I don't think it would have had such an appeal.
Absolutely not. Yeah, because the subtlety really starts setting in towards the end of that. Like, once it starts finding its groove a little more, and you understand the setting, you're like, I don't need to be told that these people were more racist or more sexist than they are now because I know that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. They drank at work, like, big deal,
At one point, actually, well, we'll probably come to this later about the drinking, but I will just remember that and try and come back. It was interesting as well, like I was saying this to my wife, like, it's interesting the tone, because it feels a lot lighter than later episodes.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit jokier and a bit more smirky, but then it will sort of, like, shift so quickly. So it's like Don going into the elevator, and it's like that sort of Peggy going into the elevator. Yeah. And it's sort of that like jaunty 60s music.
Right,
But
it's
then,
like the beginning of the apartment kind of.
Yeah, that's
vibe.
it.
Right.
And then the way I think it's Harry and Ken and someone else, the way they talk about it, you're like, oh god, that is dark. That is quite unsettling. Like,
right, where they're talking about what they talk about, like, you know, how they're gonna abuse women, basically.
Yeah.
It's very creepy. You know.
Yeah,
we're gonna go out to the strip club. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh god. Well, those like, I forgot how much I hate Pete Campbell. Hate him.
Oh, and especially in the beginning here, because he's just such a little shit, especially in the beginning. Like, he pours it on thick here, and you can tell he's just this little weasel trying to get in Don's pocket, and you're like, you know, you're immediately put off by him from the get-go. But it's weird because I found a lot to love in Pete Campbell, especially in later seasons, and here he's just the worst. There's no way you're gonna like him.
Yeah, no, very much so. Like, his treatment of Peggy and all that. And I did write down one line that I thought was great, where I think Pete's trying to talk to Don. Don's like, "Oh, you are tough to take first thing in the morning."
Yeah,
and that's a fantastic line.
Because he just starts walking in, and he's like, "Hey, Don, so what you doing? Yeah, who's this little number?" And like, "You ready for this meeting?" And he's like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, that whole thing where it's like, where Peggy tries to leave and he's like, hold on, honey, I'm just working my way up. Like, oh, fuck you, Pete, you're the worst.
He is. He's totally just the most unlikable person from the get-go. So it's kind of a miracle that, you know, he has his very strong moments towards the end, where you just start, you know, you always go back and forth with him, but you understand his character a lot more towards the end, like when his family dies, or everything falls apart around him. You start seeing what kind of person he really is.
That's because it is interesting, sort of the way the show positions itself as one of those sort of, it is, quote, like the good old days, as like four straight white wealthy men. You know, this is it. This is the perfect thing. But it's that interesting thing as well of like, yeah, Don and say like Roger Sterling are having a great time, but you can be like Pete's character, where wealthy, white, and with a certain amount of power, but still one of life's losers. Like, he still isn't reaping the rewards that everyone else is, because he's not doing it properly.
Right, and that's pretty much the ultimate irony of Don Draper, is that he is in this, he's trying to build this artifice around himself, but like, he's trying to make that ad, you know, where he says in the episode, he says, you know, you are okay. Like, that's what the ultimate goal of advertising. And Don's trying to find the work that will eventually make him be able to say that to himself. And he tries to constantly build this artifice. Like, you know, I didn't notice this until I literally watched it the third time, and my girlfriend was watching it with me, and she said, we don't really know that Don's married until the end of the episode. And then we see this, like, you know, fake 50s, you know, light household, basically, at the end, where you can already feel it starting to crumble around him. But this is the first time we've even seen Don outside of work, as far as being in his house and even knowing that he had a wife. So
just like a startlingly good twist. Just like, you've got him with Midge, and you've got him flirting, and you've got him drinking and all that, and you're like, okay, so this is like a man about town, like just bacheloring around.
See, I didn't even notice that. Like, see, I guess I kind of remembered or knew from all the, you know, publicity surrounding it that he was definitely married.
Yeah.
Like, so it didn't even register with me that the show doesn't even give you that information until the last, like, 3 or 5 minutes.
Oh, no, I remember the first time I watched it, and I sort of watched it in a bit of a vacuum.
Right.
It was one of those things of, like, a friend had told a friend, and I...
Yeah, see, not like the 3-time Emmy winner. That was me going into it the first time. Like, knowing a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that's it, because, like, when I first watched it, and that scene at the end, I was like, well, where's he going on this train? And then, like, he shows up, like... whose house is this? And then it all starts to come into my head. Like, oh shit, this is really interesting.
See, yeah, that makes it a lot better, I think, honestly, because I just didn't even register with me.
Yeah, no, just fat. I mean, it's just a cracking pilot. Like, it's so well structured.
It really is, and I think it's just really powerful how the meeting ends up with Dawn and Lucky Strike, and then immediately he has this meeting with Rachel, right? Like Rachel Menken.
Yeah.
Her name's Rachel Katz towards the end. She just totally calls him out on all his BS. Like, she totally just flips him out, basically, when she calls him out on just, like, this really fake, cynical rant he goes on. and it's totally, she really calls him out. She calls him on his bluff, basically saying like, love doesn't exist, and your life is a lie. It's all just stuff I sell you. And she's like, I don't think you believe that. And he's like, oh shit, she's totally right.
Yeah.
So, and then he just has one of those like, there's so many moments in the show where Dom's just staring into space, and you're just like, oh my god, I'm so depressed. Yeah. Especially like the last season. I watched most of the last season the past week. So there's so many little moments of just crushing despair and melancholy in the show, but they're so quiet that they're never like too accented, I guess. But they're just they can really get to you, especially like a second time around when you know where the stuff is going.
Yeah, no, I mean Jon Hamm does like fantastic work, because it would be so easy to make that character really cheesy.
Right.
He does it well because he's sort of believable as that sort of super alpha male of like, commands the room and everyone loves him and they go into battle blindfolded with him and all that.
Right.
And he's always got an answer to everything. But at the same time, like you say, there are those moments where the mask sort of slips and you're like, this guy is just having a slow motion nervous breakdown that we're watching. Yeah, it's fascinating. He does. I love the fact that Jon Hamm has gone on from this and is going to be huge, because I think he's just so amazing.
This show, I can't believe he didn't win an Emmy until his last season on Mad Men, which I thought was insane.
Yeah,
and,
that's it.
I was basically jumping up and down in my living room when he finally won, because I was like, this is one of the greatest characters of TV ever, and I can't believe they're not just now giving him an award for it.
Yeah, it's nuts, because it almost felt like one of those things where, because obviously they gave Cranston it 4 times for Breaking Bad.
Right, and that's such a flashy show. I love Breaking Bad, definitely, but it's definitely more like in your face, like acting, and it's hard to just deny that. But it's crazy that they were on the same network, roughly around the same time, and this AMC network had like this creative renaissance that was
so
incredible.
In one period they had Breaking Bad, Mad Men, and I'm not a fan of it, but it is really successful, Walking Dead.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, so that is like, there's a little town called Sonoya where they film most of it, and they have like a little tourism business based around it. Like, so I'm aware totally of, there's like, it's a phenomenon. Even if I don't think the show is fantastic, it's totally a phenomenon, especially where I'm from.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and AMC is obviously something that I'd never heard of until this. And then now, whenever they announce a TV show, I'm like, ooh, I'll check that out.
Yeah, I'm like, Into the Badlands. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Give it
Preacher. What is that?
Oh, love Preacher.
Yeah, I haven't seen the show yet.
It's good. Let me see what else I've got for episode. Oh, well, I think one thing as well about this episode, because I was sort of... so I had a bit of a look back and I had a bit of a research to see where it all came from. So, the writer, what's it, Matthew
Weiner? I say
Weiner.
Weiner, yeah. Weiner just sounds too silly, so.
It does. So, Weiner was working on Becca, that one where Ted Danson was like a doctor and a...
Oh, yeah, I've never even heard of that one.
Yeah, I remember it being on like Comedy Central when I was growing up.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And he wrote, while he was looking at that, he wrote a spec script for Mad Men as a... One of the stories I read was he wrote that as like an audition to David Chase for Sopranos.
Ah, okay.
Like he said, this is a script that this is what I can do. And David Chase hired him, straight away and said, I love it, you've got something to say, it's good structure and so on. And that was in 2000. Wow. And then it wasn't until, I think it was like the Sopranos hiatus where they went off for a year. Mm-hmm. And then he tried to sell Mad Men to HBO. And HBO said, yeah, we'll make it, but we'll make it after Sopranos, and David Chase has to be co-showrunner. And Weiner said, no, I don't want to do that because it's my own thing. And AMC snapped it up, and obviously it was one of their biggest ever hits.
Yeah, and I think they took a pretty big gamble on it, as far as like, they were never known for having like the prestige drama appeal over here in the States, for sure. Like, they were never known for any original programming. It's mostly just a channel to show movies all day.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic that they got Mad Men and Breaking Bad. I think they probably won 100 Emmys just between those two shows.
Yeah, I mean,
in a few years.
Peabody's, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think the one thing with Mad Men, which is a big gamble as well, is how expensive it is.
Right.
There are some expensive bits.
Weiner is obviously so meticulous about making sure everything is so period specific that it's almost freaky. And like some people, like, my parents, they find a lot of appeal in mostly the aesthetics of Mad Men. Like, I don't think my parents like the show, but I think they find a lot of more appeal in like the way it looks, because I mean they've totally adopted that sort of mid-century modern style, because they got a new house not too long ago, so they've totally adopted that kind of style. They love it so much, but you know, even more so maybe than the characters sometimes. But yeah, Weiner's a little bit freaky when it comes to like making sure everything looks exactly how it was supposed to, you know, and basically just like, well, if this song didn't come out before this year, then we can't play it, you know. And and like, even if the show was just that, like, that'd be kind of boring, but still it'd be impressive. But it's so much more than that, luckily.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, it's good in the sense that it is, because you don't often get style and substance, which is nice.
Right, exactly.
Like, sometimes you have to, you know, one will trump the other. But I mean, I did read as well, like this first episode, one of the biggest issues they had was finding era-appropriate light bulbs. For like the main sort of bullpen. They had like the halogen lights, and they were like, oh no, the light doesn't work, it's whatever. So they had to get a factory who used to make them to bring out one of their old machines to make enough lights for them, and then shut the machine down again, and so on. Which is incredible for a pilot. Like, it's a $3 million pilot that could go nowhere.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, it's magic for that, you know, like it's this way of capturing time that not many people are able to do. It's a period piece that's like quite different than most things you see on television or in film, for that matter. Very
much so. I mean, so like, you know, in terms of a period piece as well, they don't do that thing that, like, you know, when you watch a lot of show, like if you watch a film made now but set in the past, like set in the 60s or the 50s or whatever, and they sort of have to tweak a person's beliefs to sort of match closer to what we've got now.
Right.
Because they can't have... Because obviously a lot of characters... I mean, Don Draper does some things, says some lines, and does some things that are reprehensible.
Sure.
Because of the time. Like, his treatment of Sal later on is disgusting.
Yeah.
You know, he makes a joke about never hiring Jews in this episode.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, well, that's era-appropriate, and you got to stick with it.
Yeah, right.
Because sometimes you will find a show will try and, like... Or a TV show or a movie or whatever will try and make...
They'll pull the punches
ahead of their time.
Exactly, yeah. They'll pull their punches because, you know, they're the good guy, right?
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that Pete is, later on in the show, he's the person who probably is the most progressive in terms of his beliefs. Like, he has these, like, he'll say things that, you know, they're coming from a really good place, but even if they're, like, a little bit off color, like, in the way he presents them, I'm having trouble thinking of, like, a specific one, but he's, like, especially, I think it's when, I want to say it's the beginning of season 5, where it's starting to be the civil rights movement starts kind of coming into the show's history more. Like, he says some things that are really, you know, they sound kind of racist. They would sound definitely racist nowadays, but he has, his heart is so in the right place that you're like, oh, Pete's the good guy in this situation, and he's standing up for, you know, people who are, you know, less privileged, or, you know, previously we wouldn't have thought of that. Pete being the guy to stand up for, like, women and, you know, black people. But yeah, go Pete Campbell.
That's okay. Well, I'd be intrigued to definitely be intrigued to see that.
Right.
I think in terms of like the structure as well, more so than like later episodes, the conflict is very easy. You know, it's not an internal conflict. It's not something that sort of like gets, you know, there's not like a bit like you're not in a conflict and you don't understand it, and then there's like a flashback at the end and you're like, because of this.
It's pretty much a day in the life of Sterling Cooper, and it's trying to put you in their mindset, as far as like, how are we going to land this lucky strike, you know, or how are we going to do this new campaign. What I also liked about this episode is like it shows you, it basically sets the tone for how the 60s are going to change everything that the 50s have just set up. Like how the perfect domicile that agencies like Sterling Cooper have worked on creating through their advertisements is already starting to crumble, because these Reader's Digest, you know, are saying these bad things about smoking, and it's like these Lucky Strike guys are like, what on earth? Like, this is unlike anything we've ever heard of. Everything we do is healthy, and, you know, everybody loves smoking. And it's just a tiny little crack, but it's already like, okay, the 60s are going to change everything. And these characters' lives are going to be completely upended by just all the social and political change of this time period, which I thought was like a nice little like precursor to a lot of what's going to come, basically.
Yeah, no, that's good. Like it is sort of the golden age of the 50s is about to end,
Right.
and you know these are
It's just a little tiny little signifier that's what's going to happen.
yeah. No, it's fun. It's actually interesting because it would be such a hard sell for this show to say to
Hmm.
someone like the conflict and the victory of the first episode is that you watch a drunk adulterer
Hmm.
convince people how to sell cigarettes. You know,
Yeah,
that's
when you
that's
put
the
it in
sort of
that kind
thing.
of terms, it's like, wow, that sounds disgusting,
Yeah.
revolting almost. But
But at the
yeah,
same
it's
time, when you watch it and he goes, they're toasted. You're like, oh
yeah,
shit, that's awesome. You know, you
yeah.
kind of you are. It's there is
One
this
of
thing I
the
remember.
yeah.
What's that? Sorry.
No, yeah, just like that's one of the many big joys of the show. I feel like is when Don pitches a great idea, and you're just like, oh, that's so
Yeah.
brilliant, and then you just sit back in your chair a little bit. You're like, oh man, that was so fantastic.
There is that there's a rule where if you're gonna have a character who is unlikable, you have to
Hmm.
make them capable. Like that's I
Right.
remember I don't know if that was on a podcast or I read a writer had written that,
Hmm.
and it was the idea that and you can find examples of it where a character will be reprehensible, but if they're good at what they do,
Right.
people will follow them. And I think Draper's like that in the sense of like
Totally.
because he's so successful, you go along with him being pretty awful as a human being.
Yeah.
You know, and that
Pretty much.
episode I think is a very good one of them where you're presented with this character who, by all sort of modern barometers or whatever, should be a villain. But
Right.
instead, you're like, yeah, you sell those fucking cigarettes, nice.
Exactly.
You know, and you're
Yeah.
into it, like, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
It,
I love Don
it,
Draper.
Tom Draper's amazing. This episode, I definitely think, like, in terms of like its structure and the way it goes, you could chuck in a couple more scenes and just make it a movie. I think. I think
Right.
it's more so than the rest of the show, which are like little islands in a bigger world. This one,
Sure.
I think, you could just like flesh out a bit more, add a few more scenes here and there, and with a bit of tweaking, you could just have a perfectly good movie
Yeah,
that
I
has
think
the same ending. You know,
yeah,
just-
yeah, definitely. He's got these very Matt Weiner's got definitely got these very cinematic tendencies in the directorial work, and it's so weird that Mad Men is like a lot of Mad Men is just people talking to each other in a room, and
Yeah.
but you're never. I mean, I know some people are, but you're never really bored. You're never really bored by that aspect of it. Like it's just people talking, and it's like yeah, they're talking about everything, and it's just perfect. And the dialogue's so well written, it's so well directed that. You kind of just forget that most of the show is just people in rooms talking to each other,
Yeah, very little action. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
except the lawnmower. But
Except the lawnmower, yeah, of course.
yeah,
Um,
of course.
I have it in my notes, which I don't. This doesn't really apply for the last episode, but I think it does for the first episode. This first episode is like if you had The Apartment, but you had Stanley Kubrick direct it. I
Right?
think
Yeah,
that was my idea, sort of like because I love The Apartment. The Apartment's one of my favorites.
it's fabulous. Yeah,
Such a fantastic film, and it has like it has a scene in it of cynicism, but it's mostly
Right.
romance.
Yeah.
Whereas Mad Men, I feel like Mad Men has a seam of romance, but it's mostly cynicism. You know,
right.
there is a sort of romantic idea of like, oh, the '60s. You know, look how nice they dress, and you know, no one's
You could
afraid
drink
to
at work.
smoke, and
Yeah.
this and this and this. And everything's gorgeous, and the music's cool, and
Mm-hmm.
the world's about. Like you say, the world's on the knife edge, and things are going to go one way or go the other.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you've got Don saying, you know, there is no tomorrow. Love was created by people like me. You know, well, let's find the most cynical way we can sell cigarettes to
Right.
people. And even though now we're specifically not lying to them, but we know that they kill people. So now we are trying to maneuver around
Yeah,
that, you know,
right,
trying to change
right.
the conversation.
Exactly. If you don't have
Which,
the conversation,
yeah,
change it.
fascinating. And
Yeah,
so much smoke. So much
Yeah,
smoking.
yeah.
So much.
And it gets really depressing when towards the end when it finds out it finally catches up to someone, but not the
Yeah.
person you expected it to be, and depressingly so. I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Well, let's talk about it now. Let's go into
Sure.
the last episode, which so this was the first time I'd ever watched this episode because I only got as far as episode 3 or 4 or 5 of season 4,
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I believe. So this was miles away from me. Like this was a million miles away from. I think I left them in 1965, and this was 1970.
Right.
So Don is a million miles away from where I started.
Quite literally, yeah.
What was when you first watched this, when this first happened, how did you feel about it?
So I should give a little background. So I said, my family finally really got into Mad Men a little bit later than I did, but we all got dressed up in our little '60s costume, or like a suit and tie. We all got together and watched the finale together, which I thought was really nice.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. And I was actually blown away by this episode. I think there was no perfect way it was going to happen. Unlike Breaking Bad, where everything has to come to a certain point, and that's where it has to end. Mad Men is different because these characters are so open-ended. Really, like they don't have a specific arc they must follow, or I thought it wrapped up every character pretty well. I did cry twice during this time watching it again. Because this show meant a lot to me, and I think it's just fabulous. I really liked this last episode, and it's funny because I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but my dad actually works for Coca-Cola in Atlanta, so
no way.
That was kind of bizarre. Yeah, to be at the end there and just be like, wow, that's it. That's Don's dream. Was the company my dad works at now.
Oh, that's wild. Because obviously that commercial that's got to be in the top 5.
Oh yeah,
of, commercials that people know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wish it. Yeah, I wish it had ended with Ridley Scott's 1984 ad, the Apple Macintosh.
Yeah.
Don. That's the ad Don went on to make.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one Pete makes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I thought, when I watched it, I was sort of like, oh, do I go back and try and catch up? So now they're all on Netflix. It is quite tempting just to dip in and out and sort of go, okay, I'll watch one.
Yeah, I'd say it's worth it. I'd say it's worth it because there's so much good stuff in it. I wouldn't even say that the finale is the strongest episode of this last season. Honestly, I think I just love the show so much that I like all the episodes, but I wouldn't even say that this was the strongest episode of the last 7. I think there were just fantastic, heartbreaking episodes in this season, and a lot of those great musical moments that I love so much about Mad Men are buried in there somewhere too. So it's always good to find.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
I was very happy with everyone's 70s looks. Everyone went 70s. I like that. A lot of sideburns, a lot of terrible porn mustaches.
John Slattery totally embraces the 70s a little too much in this. Yeah. In this era of the show, because as soon as I remember you see him for the first time with that mustache, and you're just supposed to be like, whoa, what's going on? Because he's been clean shaven for the past, 7 years, basically.
Yeah, no, it's wild. I thought he looked good. He looked okay.
It looks good, smart on him finally.
Yeah, that's it. No, it was interesting. Don never wears a suit in this episode. That was really odd.
Oh yeah.
Seeing him always immaculate, and he just looked like shit the whole time.
Yeah, and this whole last season is kind of like him unraveling, and it's really heartbreaking to watch because I found it so fascinating watching Don just throw his life away. Because what happens basically is, it's hard to garner from this one episode, but basically the big agency who's always wanted them, or who's they're always been their main rivals, finally buys them, and Don really has no purpose in his work anymore. He can't, the whole point of his arc, I think, was he was trying to find, he found joy in the struggle of, fighting against the bigger guy and fighting against, just trying to find something true in his art, and then there's an episode where he's like, stop struggling, you won. That's one of those devastating lines that one of the McCann executives says to him, where they're basically, Don's done with his work. He doesn't find any satisfaction in it anymore because he found a lot of joy in the struggle, of just they would constantly cut themselves short somehow, where they would have to be sold to a different agency, or they were out of money, or constant setbacks, and basically he found joy in trying to overcome that and still make good work. But they finally reached a point where they couldn't go any higher, and he just realized he couldn't find any more satisfaction in the work, basically.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so he goes on this sort of spiritual. We find him in the midst of this spiritual journey at the beginning of the episode, which is he's been going on for the past couple episodes, but he's far and away from even the last time we just saw him, which was, I guess, 10 minutes ago as far as TV time goes, but it feels like an eternity basically.
Yes, no, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, just a fact. I didn't actually take tons of notes because I was quite engrossed in it, and
Yeah.
it was. It's been interesting, obviously, because with this podcast, I watch a lot of final episodes,
Right.
and you tend to find they kind of split into. You have like a narrative finale. Like Breaking Bad's a great one. Like you've got to get a story finished at that point.
Right, and it's a perfect wrap up of like it's the consequences of people's actions finally come to a head and everything is resolved in that way. Like where it's just like boom, done.
That's it. So it's like I think the analogy I always use is that we set up all the dominoes and then they're all falling and then they're all done.
Exactly.
But then you have like say the finale to West Wing or Lost or one of those sort of like ensemble shows that have always been about the character and less about the story. Well, sort of Lost. And then you have an ending, you have a finale like the Mad Men one, which is that sort of thing of like, it's not narrative, it's character, it's emotion.
Right. It's like where Don had to commit suicide in order for this, whole thing to work. It was like, this really could go anywhere, which is kind of almost more freeing. I feel like, Vince Gilligan's like, I know exactly where I'm headed, but Matthew Weiner's like, I could literally put my characters in any situation, by the end, and I thought he did really good choices with these. Yeah,
because like in the lead up to this, I did see a lot of like fan theories of the opening credits are actually a spoiler for Don's going to jump off the building.
That's the one
Don's
that comes to my mind as well. Yeah,
DB Cooper and I think that would have just been pointless because the whole like you say it was the struggle and. You just needed that next step, but then it also had to be time appropriate. So it makes sense that like as the 70s start, he gets into sort of like new age stuff. Like the Summer of Love's just ended, and
everyone's starting to wake up and realize what's going on.
That's it, and they're sort of like they've taken all that sort of hippie new age stuff and they've monetized it. He pays to go to that place and so on. And it's like okay, now we can make money off this.
Yeah.
And he becomes part of that.
Yeah, I love how Don just basically hates hippies for, I want to say, like, the entire show, basically. But I think because I think he sees so much advertising in it. He sees so much artifice in it. And he sees, there's no genuine people there. So I feel like whenever, I remember in the first season, like, he meets all these hippies and, like, you guys are just full of shit, basically. And that was helpful for me because I was always one of those kids who bought into like the hippies being cool and being, part of a different time. They were the, more enlightened era, but really they were just full of shit as everybody else. They just smoked a lot of drugs and didn't do anything. But
that's it.
Yeah, and I think it's as soon as he sees someone being earnest, that's when he just completely his wall breaks down. Like he finally decides to give in, embrace Leonard. And this guy who's been in the show for 2 minutes essentially just kind of changes the entire dynamic because he just saw someone being earnest and he saw someone being vulnerable, which is something he never saw really back in New York, aside from a very quiet moment with someone he cared about, it was just something that wasn't very commonplace. So I feel like it just finally broke down this final wall that he had between himself and happiness, which is what I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, no, awesome, and I was really happy that it wasn't because when that sort of the Brett Gelman had got out of the seat and he'd been talking about his thing and then the seat was empty and I was like, oh, I really hope it's not going to be Don who sits in the chair and then has the sort of like
the realization. Yeah, exactly.
It was so good to have that other dude and then like Don just sort of see him and be like, oh shit, this is it. I understand this completely. And this, and this level of honesty is a foreign language to him, and just to see it all, and then that big, you say the big hug, and they both just break down. You're like, that's very, very clever writing in the sense that it would be very easy to just get John Hamm to sit in that chair,
right? Sit in the psychologist's chair and on the couch, and just explain to a psychologist what is wrong with me, and then I realize now, the epiphany.
That's great. And they say just that guy, that actor, just that guy who played Leonard, just comes on, just kills it for a couple of minutes.
I know,
and just finishes the show.
Yeah, basically, he's wrapped up the entire show in this very detached monologue from anything else. Like, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with anybody else in the show, but still, it's just this really honest, true moment that, not a lot of media can really get to sometimes,
That's it, and it's not like he sits there and says, oh, I work in LA, I work in advertising or something like that. Like, no, he's just another man, and Don just sees himself and gets it.
Right.
They don't lay it on too thick. They don't have it as like, my name's Ron Maper. It's
My
like,
name's
no,
Dick Whitman.
Yeah, my name's
I
Dick
stole
Whitman.
my name from some guy who died in Korea.
Yeah. Then that's a totally different ending.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic. And then just it's my final note is just how interesting.
Yeah.
Like that was sort of what, like, when it ended, and then he's meditating and he's got the smile, and then it was like the Coke advert. I was like, God, what an interesting way to end a show.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was just gonna linger in the back of my head for a couple of days now, and just
for sure.
really make me think about it.
Yeah, and then I know Weiner's come out and said, like, yeah, it was Don. Don did do that, okay? So, like, some people are going to be like, oh, it's going to be an unanswered question, like the Sopranos type deal, where you're not really going to know what happened at the end. But he's like, yeah, he did make that. So
yeah, like he goes back to McCann.
Yeah, he finds some way to do that, and because that's right, because McCann does have the Coke account. I was thinking maybe he started his own agency or something, but no.
Yeah, there is a line early on where Peggy says, "Do you want to come back and work on Coke?"
Yeah, exactly.
And so he just shows up and he's like, "Shut up, I've got an idea."
Right, exactly. And he has mentioned in the past, like, that was like one of his, white whales, basically, like Coke, or an airline. I know there was a point they did get an airline, but he wanted a big airline. Or he wanted Coca-Cola, he wanted Hershey's. I mean, there's a great, fantastic episode where Don basically is another one where Don is teetering on the brink, but he basically, I don't know if you saw this one, it's where he basically explains to some executives from Hershey how he grew up in a whorehouse, and Hershey bars were like the only thing that made him happy, and he's basically like drunk and almost crying to these executives, and they like freaks them out, and it basically like gets him fired from, or at least like temporary on leave for like, I don't know, half a season. I think he's not working at Sterling Cooper for like the first half of season 7, which is totally bizarre to see him just out of his element. And like the first scene of season 7 is fantastic because it's God, I'm having trouble remembering his name. He's the goofy guy who pees his pants in season.
Bill Murray's brother.
Is that really who it is? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Frank.
Yeah, Freddie Rumsen. Freddie Rumsen.
That's it, yeah.
That's right, Freddie Rumsen. So, yeah, like the first scene is him giving this incredible pitch about a watch, and it turns out that Don paid him to tell this executive that, to pitch it for them. Because he's doing his work from home because he can't find meaning in anything else besides, pitching something to someone. So it's a great last two. I mean, it's 14 episodes, but that last season is absolutely great, I think, in a lot of ways.
That's good. I mean, because one thing I loved about that last episode is, like, looking at it, to do it, like, from first to last, like, where we started and where we end. Mm-hmm. Peggy is such an amazing thing to have, like, her
definitely.
Intro in the first episode as sort of a mousy secretary who sort of makes a half-hearted pass at Dawn and goes to bed with Pete, just doesn't know what she's doing. And then to have the end where she's just kicking everyone's ass.
Absolutely. She's breaking glass ceilings left and right, which I found a lot of joy in, especially Joan, I think, really, like, she's totally the unsung hero of this entire show, because I think she's one of the few people who everything she does feels true and, like, morally righteous, but yet she still gets shit on, basically, by the world. Like, she marries this nice guy, she has a nice life, and then he kind of rapes her, and he goes away to be a doctor and doesn't even care about her. And, she's kind of thrown to the side by a lot of people, mostly because of the way she looks, which is crazy, but by the end, she's totally, like, in the beginning, it's great to see that she's holding all the cards at the beginning, or at least she feels she is. Like, when she's the top dog as the secretary, but really, as it goes on, you realize that she is essentially neutered in the office because she's a woman. And by the end, she really does hold all the cards. And she has worked her way up, like, through just sheer force of will and hard work and tenaciousness. She actually broke the glass ceiling, like, in the hardest way. Like, Peggy had a lot of it handed to her because she was just naturally gifted. But Joan really, really worked hard. And I think it's so great to see both of those characters really come out on top, because, I mean, it's telegraphed from the beginning that Peggy's going to be the workhorse, the workaholic person who will always choose work over love, and Joan is going to be the domestic, normal housewife who has the perfect family, like in the 50s, basically. And it's kind of, but by the end, you realize that Peggy's going to choose, love or like being comfortable in a comfortable relationship in a job she is good at, and Joan is going to and she's going to be in love with Rizzo, right? And that will be her ending. But Joan chooses, to start a brand new adventure with this, agency, and she rejects the love of Captain Pike. I call him. I don't know. Remember the actor's name?
That's what he's from.
Yeah, Star Trek.
Bruce Greenwood.
Yeah. Okay, that's his name. Yeah.
In my notes, I have what's his name?
Yeah. Captain Pike.
He's from O.J. Simpson, and he's from.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah. I just remember as Captain Pike, and
that's it.
Which is bizarre. Yeah, because he's like in the, he's Captain Pike, and then Star Trek, I guess, was on the late '60s. It was over by this point, but I think. It's funny.
Yeah, that is weird.
His character was basically a beeping wheelchair.
Yeah.
Which is a weird show. I love the original series though.
I've never watched it.
Oh yeah,
no,
watch a few.
I've watched a couple of the time travel ones where they go back to like Nazi Germany and they go back and be cowboys because of the
gangsters, 30s gangsters and stuff. It's funny.
Another bookend, like I guess first to last, is lung cancer.
Oh yeah,
so you have like
we did finally come back to that.
Yeah, and then you have Betty.
Yeah, of course. That was a moment that really got me. Because she's definitely not a character you expect to bear the brunt of, one of the shows. It's like no one's really gotten sick from all this horrible lifestyle, and you wouldn't expect it to be Betty because, she's sort of an innocent character. She never really does anything to deserve that kind of death, I guess, but it's so devastating the way they do it. And there's a shot of her. I believe it's when the second to last episode, or maybe the third to last, where she's walking up the stairs, and she has cancer, and she's just trying to soldier on, and it's so heartbreaking. And but I guess you can't.
Likeable character though.
I know, and it's weird that this show has this power, like where characters you don't really care about can come back and surprise you in different ways, where you just you really do feel bad eventually for Betty because. I mean, she's been horrible to most people on the show, and she definitely is one of the most petty people on the show. And you just genuinely don't like her, and for good reason. But for some reason, like Henry, he's a stand-up guy. We love Henry. Like my girlfriend, she loved Henry as a character, but she just couldn't stand Betty. She's like, "How are you treating Henry this way? He's like way too nice to you."
Yeah. God, no, I hated that character so much.
And they really try to do everything to make you hate her, and not in like a Skylar White way where she's actually right. It's like, no, she's literally just the most petty, sort of vile person at times. She doesn't really have good intentions ever. You can't defend it. You can't defend her intentions. You're just like, yeah, she's just bad and wants to be petty. She's really petty.
But then also as well, like her final scene in the show is while she has lung cancer, smoking at the table.
Yeah.
God damn it, Betty, you're the worst.
Yeah. I mean, really, once you get to that point, you're just like, wow, I feel so bad for her that
that's it.
It is really quite sad, honestly. Like, I did tear up a little bit because, Don's pretty much losing everything around him, including someone he really did care about, at least at one point. And his world is definitely collapsing all around him, which is, it's pretty heartbreaking as most of the Mad Men is, but especially that last season. Yeah,
no, it's definitely something I could handle dipping back into to just sort of see. Because there were some questions I had, like why Ken only had one eye and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's definitely something you want to watch and experience for yourself, because I didn't even think about that, because, it's just such a weird moment in the show. You're like, oh my god, did that just happen? And I guess it's not a spoiler now, but like someone shoots him. Like, he's out with some GM executives. Like, he's supposed to be their account guy for GM out in Detroit, and it turns out these Detroit guys are absolutely, like, vile, horrible people who are, like... And then they, like, go on a hunting trip, and someone shoots Ken, and, like, you think that Ken just got shot in the face and died. Like, that's the impression you're left with for, like, not, like, 20 minutes. They don't go back to Ken for a while, and then you're just like, oh my god, they killed Ken. You bastards.
Nice.
Basically, yeah. So... That's a funny little moment. I mean, it's so great to go back through the show, and especially all the little, depressing moments are always great. I think they're so well done, but I think a lot of the musical moments are worth it too. Because, I mean, there are a few shows that use music quite as well as Mad Men. I mean, especially, and there's like the first season finale, the Bob Dylan song where he comes home and no one's there. Like there's two different endings where
Yeah.
it's the real ending, or it looks like the false ending where he made it home in time and he get to go with the picnic with kids and the wife, and then he comes home and it's like playing Bob Dylan, Don't Think Twice, It's Alright, and it's so depressing.
Yeah.
And another one of my favorite episodes, The Suitcase, is where I don't know if you got to that one. It's the one where
he swaps suitcases, doesn't he? And him and Sal go on the trip about the trench coats. God, that's.
It's the one with it's just him and Peggy in the office, and it's the Cassius Clay fight is on.
Oh no!
Oh my goodness! I think that one is probably the best episode they've ever done, and I wanted to discuss that moment a little bit because there's a moment in that episode where I think it's Dawn touches Peggy's hand, and it's totally sort of to reflect how far they've come since the first episode. Because she's trying to totally make a pass at him, basically, in that first episode, trying to, that's what is going to get her ahead. But then there's this moment in this episode where basically, so Anna Draper died, and the person who was actually Don Draper's wife, who he met and was friends with, she actually dies. He gets news of that in this episode, and basically Peggy has to comfort him. And it's one of the more sad episodes, but I think it's absolutely show's finest hour, probably. And there's this moment where Dawn grabs her hand, and it's totally not a sexual, even romantic thing. It's just like, I need someone here, and I care about you. And it's totally meant to echo that moment where their relationship dynamic was so different.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to get back in on it.
Oh, probably so. We should do another one. We'll do a sequel, and we're like, wow, that episode was so great.
Yeah, that's it. Anything else you'd like to add about Mad Men? This is your moment. If there's any particular scenes or particular characters, or
I'm a huge Beatles fanatic, and the end of one of the episodes, I think it's in season 5. I think someone gives Don a copy of Revolver, and he puts on. They're like, "You need to listen to the last song, man," and it's like a hippie moment, and he plays Tomorrow Never Knows, which is the most trippy, bizarre Beatles song ever recorded, when John Lennon was just tripping out of his mind, reading Timothy Leary, playing guitar backwards and stuff. And then there's it's like a montage of all the characters' moments, what they're doing, how they're coping with the turbulent 60s, and then he just cuts it off during the middle, and he's like, what the hell is this?
Okay.
Yeah, and then I think another great musical moment, I think that, I'll just add this in there, when Roger becomes a hippie, basically. Here he just becomes this orgy guy, he goes to all these orgy parties, and then he's just playing the Beach Boys, I Just Wasn't Made For These Times, the Pet Sounds cut. And it's so well done, and I thought it's almost on the nose, but it's just so perfect.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, they're picking this period 60 to 70. You've got so much good stuff because so many things happen.
Right.
You've got the Kennedys, you've got Martin Luther King, like you say, Cassius Clay,
and it's
Charlie
great
Manson.
Absolutely, and it's so great to see how these characters react to each of these moments. You almost look forward to, not really look forward to tragedy, but the same way you kind of do, because you're wanting to see how would the character I love react to when Kennedy got shot, or when the Beatles came out, or when the Rolling Stones they went to a Rolling Stones concert. How would Harry Crane react when he went to a Rolling Stones concert? And there's fabulous little moments like that. I mean, I get choked up about the moon landing in general, but I think the way they do it in Mad Men makes it even more powerful, honestly.
Well, there's that awesome thing as well where one of the episodes I remember watching, me and my wife were watching it, and it's Roger Sterling's daughter's wedding, and you see the invite, and it sort of lingers on the invite for a while. And my wife was like, "What's that about?" And I was like, "Well, because it's November '63, so it's the day after the Kennedy assassination."
Right, which was the day that Doctor Who premiered in the UK for the first time.
So I was like, "Yeah, so that was 3 episodes out, I think," and I was like, "Oh, okay, so that's what we're building to." Her wedding is going to coincide with the Kennedy assassination. And then I was thinking to myself, I can only imagine how Don's going to react to Kennedy getting killed. There's a lot of similarities character-wise there. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And it's just so great. That's another little fun historical aspect of the show. It's like, oh, this little history thing. Like, things can be completely interrupted by something. You're blindsided by it. You're like, what time are we? What year is it? And then you see something happening. You're like, oh, that's where we are. That's where we are.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's a nice little quirk to the show that it makes it really fun as far as the historical accuracy and like how that history collides with the drama of the show.
It's like nowadays if you watch something and did you see Spotlight?
Yeah, I saw Spotlight.
And there was one point I think where the date came up and I saw it was like August 2001. Like, oh shit.
Right.
Okay, well,
yeah, it's about to happen.
come around the corner, so that's definitely gonna. And then the next minute, you see them all watching the TVs.
Yeah.
And there is that interesting thing to have that if you've got that historical knowledge, because obviously we do because we're only 15 years out, but like our children will watch things set during this period. And if they know their history, then they'll be like, "Oh shit, you got to be careful because this is a month later," and so on. Yeah, when they make a Mad Men that goes from 2000 to 2010 for our kids or grandkids, then we'll know. I feel like they always did that well with the show to sort of put history in it. They were very careful to, but not in the same way to just sort of be like, oh, this is the Kennedy episode, so we're just going to have people watch that and sort of be sad. It's like, no, how do these individual characters react to this event?
Right, and how did it collide with their life in a way that's dramatically satisfying, which I thought they always did very well.
Yeah, because that's it. Because I know, like, that episode is like, I think that's when Duck is still in it, and Duck and Peggy are having an affair, and he switches the TV off and so on, and you just sort of... There's an ace thing in that show where you can hear radios in the background all the way through, and you can see TVs in other rooms and everything, so the characters are doing their thing, and this huge momentous thing is happening around them, but it can't penetrate their lives, It's so well done.
Definitely.
But yeah, anything else before we finish?
Let me see. I'm gonna check my notes, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say, I love this show so much, and
yeah, it is great. I mean, it's watching these 2 episodes for this. It was like you say, it was very interesting to see the how nuanced the show got. Like when you had that first episode, and it was very much like smoke, and the
smoke,
black
drink, sexism. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, and like the black waiter, where the other guy comes over and he's like, "Is Sam bothering you?" He can be a bit chatty, like he hasn't said anything yet. It's like it's right on the nose the way they treat Peggy, the way they treat the women.
Exactly.
Sal's homosexuality is very poorly hidden.
I just couldn't help but laugh at that part because you're just like, oh my god, like he's so horrible at being straight.
Yeah,
you just can't do it. Yeah. It was great. Oh, I guess I should add that I did have this thing where I probably post some pictures just to promote the episode a little bit, but I took pictures when I was a senior in high school. They were having a contest where if you send in your photo to their website, you could try and win a guest role on Mad Men or something. And I took that picture while I'm a senior in high school. I'm trying to get a guest role on Mad Men, but I took some. So some of my senior pictures are me dressed up in a suit in this 60s looking law office.
Cool.
Yeah, it was kind of bizarre. But
I remember seeing that competition because it was like and it was, I remember the rules were very specific, like how you had to have your hair, you had to be clean shaven and all that.
Right, yeah.
So no,
I did it. Cool. I was in high school, I was like, yeah, man, this will definitely happen. Like, they'll definitely find a role for me where I can fit in at this, this office with all these 30-year-old people, being 17 years old.
Yeah, just like a young coffee boy, or you kind of come in with like,
there you go.
Mr. Draper, here's your coffee, sir.
Here you go. Yeah. So why did my secretary bring that to me?
Yeah, why have we given this extra a line?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ethan, where can people find you on the internet?
I am at Ethan Williams on Twitter.
Cool.
I've started writing my Suicide Squad review for a website called Transverso Media. I have not been very active on that site recently. Just been in the process of moving and watching some, pretty good movies, but nothing that struck me. But I should be writing more consistently now on transversomedia.com.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm also on Letterboxd if people like to follow movie reviews and stuff. But at Ethan Williams on Twitter, yeah. Yeah,
and you're on Twitter and you tweet a lot and you tweet good things, so
yeah, there you go.
100%. Especially if they want to talk about Mad Men.
Absolutely. I would love to talk about Mad Men with anybody who's interested.
Fantastic. Okay,
Just waiting for ears to listen.
Yeah, that's it. People, I mean, this is definitely one of those shows where, we started wrapping up, but we'll unwrap.
Yeah.
I always love the fact that, and I guess it's more sort of a sign of, okay, let me start again. There was an interesting thing, like Breaking Bad and Mad Men, both on TV at the same time, very different shows in terms of like, character-based, narrative-based, and so on. Obviously, you always had Cranston and John Hamm going against each other for the Emmy.
Right. Same
network. At one point, Breaking Bad's future was in jeopardy because of the funding needed for Mad Men.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But there was never a sort of like rivalry. There was never on Twitter or on the internet. There was never a thing of like, oh, you either liked this or liked that. You just liked what you liked.
See, they were both the first prestige dramas I enjoyed. Like, as soon as I finished the Mad Men DVDs, I went to the library and got the Breaking Bad DVDs next.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were totally in harmony with one another. I mean, I never, resented Breaking Bad for winning stuff, because I knew why it won over Mad Men, which was, my favorite show. But it was just so much more flashy and, in terms of cinematography and, direction and just acting especially. But, boom! That's kind of the narrative of Breaking Bad, rather. And I understand why it won a lot more awards, but yeah, so I kind of love both of those shows. They kind of existed in harmony, which is, definitely kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, because obviously now you can't do anything without it being a sort of rivalry, you find, on the internet.
Yeah.
If you like
Blur
something,
versus Oasis.
Yeah. You have to like something to the detriment of another thing. It has to be like, I like this because I don't like this. Right. Or I like this, or I hate this because I like this, and so on. So it was always cool to have those two sort of mirror images shows in the sense of we've got a white male protagonist who is going off the rails.
Yeah, kind of immoral in certain ways.
Yeah.
Both of them.
And Mad Men was more internal conflict, and Breaking Bad was more external conflict.
Sure.
And yeah, very good.
They're both fabulous.
And they're both fabulous.
Yeah, I know most people have probably seen Breaking Bad, but if you can get through a few episodes of Mad Men and start getting into the way the characters interact with each other, and kind of get past the weird, 60s, we're sexist, we drink at work, and, that kind of on-the-nose quality of it, once it starts getting more subtle, I think it's so rich. I mean, I went through it a second time with my girlfriend because she had never seen the show before, and once I did that, I started just getting so much more out of it, again, because there's so many references in the direction, and, everything. It's just a fabulous and really complex show. Very subtle too. I understand why that can be boring to some people, but I think it's just fabulous.
Yeah, I think definitely if you were going to start watching this, I definitely had the same thing. You break through those first 3 or so episodes, and it calms down. It is very much like those first couple episodes are right, let's just get this setting established.
Right.
And then after that, we can start telling stories. But I feel like those first couple episodes are very much because I think the second episode, might be the second. There's one episode that's set all at Draper's house, and I think that's very much a sense of this is how home life works. So someone else can slap your kids, and everyone just tells horrible jokes. Yeah. And everyone's a bit of a dick, and that's just the way it is. Oh, and if you're divorced, no one wants anything to do with it.
Right, yeah. You're the little crosses with the hands. Just stay away. Stay away.
That's it. Paint their doors red and just leave them.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it breaks through that, and I think it settles right down. So I think maybe they have to just do that.
Yeah, I think there are just so many great little self-contained episodes. I think a lot of dramas suffer, especially things like Game of Thrones, where they're just trying to keep things going. So no episode is ever really self-contained. It's all just the next part, and then the next part, and then the next part. But Mad Men is great because there are so many self-contained little episodes that have great little. They have their own little mini arcs. The characters do progress, but there actually is a little arc for the character, or the little story gets wrapped up at the end. And I find that a little more dramatically satisfying than something like Game of Thrones, where you just have to keep watching, and then keep watching, and then keep watching. And maybe that's a result of, the binge-watching sort of mentality. But I think it's really, I like it a lot when it's more short-form storytelling, which I think, that's the point of TV, right? A lot of times is just tell a lot of stories at once, or tell one giant story. You can do both at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think BoJack Horseman is a good example of that.
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
There's a long form narrative, but you could sit down and just pick an episode at random.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's so many great little Mad Men episodes. That, like the suitcase is just like incredible episode. I want to say it's called "Guy Walks Into an Advertising Agency."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be the one with the lawnmower. I think it's still just a great episode.
Yeah.
Even
so
outside
good.
of that moment, I was just like, wow, this episode is just so great, and it establishes a lot of new things that are going to take place in the Mad Men universe. But it's also just a great little episode.
I think there was two I really liked in the first season, and it's any time that Don interacted with the Beatniks, with Midge's friends,
right?
And destroyed them.
Exactly.
It's so much fun with that. Like, there's the episode where it's like they're in the it's like a poetry thing, and the guy's like, "Oh, you're part of the problem, man. How do you sleep at night?" And Don's just like, "On a bed of money."
Yeah.
That's just your bullshit's as much bullshit as my bullshit.
Exactly, which I totally love. Like, getting to discover that about myself. Like, oh yeah, hippies were full of shit, and then like seeing Don tear them apart, and then it's so satisfying.
Yeah, and that I think there's one where they're in lockdown, isn't it? Like they're stuck in the apartment because the police have raided something, and it builds and builds and builds, and he's just like, "You're full of shit," and they're saying he's full of shit, and it goes back and forth, and then in the end he's like, "Right, I'm going," and he goes to leave, and the Beatniks are like, "Hey man, you can't go out there," and he's like, "No, you can't go out there," and he just walks out and just in full suit, nice head of hair, suitcase. Briefcase, just walks straight through the police line. No one stops him.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because honestly, this is a show made by creatives, and creatives are traditionally beatniks. You know what I mean? Like,
they kind of look.
Thing.
I think that's probably why my perception of hippies has been so rose-colored, or it was for a long time, because like a lot of people, like their parents were hippies, or they were hippies themselves, so they're kind of looking back at that time as a simpler time. The music was great, the love was free, and people are all happy-go-lucky about it. But really, it's kind of devastating. I like how Mad Men does that, as well as something like Inside Llewyn Davis, which is like gut-punchingly sad. Sort of look at the beatnik lifestyle.
Yeah.
It was definitely not. We have this rose-colored perception, like Bob Dylan, he strummed in the Greenwich Village for like $3, and it's like, that was actually horrible. Like,
yeah, that'd be horrendous.
It was a dingy, awful life.
Yeah.
Full of fake people, just like everybody else.
Yeah, it's like running a podcast. Never. But not really, because I didn't get paid $3 an hour. Okay, right. We started wrapping it up. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Yeah, you can find my movie writing at audienceeverywhere.net, and this podcast is at First to Last Pod, and you can email me directly at firsttolastpodcast@gmail.com. There's still tons of shows to go, so obviously feel free to let me know, and I'll give you a guest spot if it's a show that fits with the original rules, and so on and so on and so on. Ethan, thank you for coming on today, mate.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
No problem, and that was really fun, and I definitely will need to. I think I'm gonna have to revisit Mad Men now and see what all the fuss is about.
Absolutely, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about it, because I love talking about it. It's so fabulous.
Definitely. Well,
yeah.
Next time I watch one, I'll have to put it on Twitter.
Yeah, definitely. We should do Peep Show next for sure. If you
that's a good show.
Yeah, I love that show so much. I probably watch that show more than any other.
Well, that's one again. That we'll talk about that in the next episode, and you can have dibs on that for the next time. That's a show I struggle to watch because my Englishness and how cringy that show is tough for me.
Yeah, British comedy is something that I've gotten a taste for, and I don't know, I just got really used to it. And I know a lot of people I watch it with, like my girlfriend, she has to walk away sometimes when I'm watching that show. But it's like, to me, it's just like, it's fine. It's like, just another thing, but...
No, I want to rip my own skin off. Just drives me up the wall. Yeah. Okay, well, until that time, mate, my name has been Sean Fallon. This has been From First to Last. Goodbye.